We'll start today with Ottawa's latest push to pivot away from reliance on the United States. The Liberal government is looking to rearm the Canadian Armed Forces while simultaneously boosting domestic defense manufacturing. It comes at a low point, though, for Canada-U.S. relations and ahead of Prime Minister Mark Carney's second trip down to Washington, D.C., where he's set to meet with U.S. President Donald Trump. Stephen Fuhr is the Secretary of State for Defense Procurement. He'll be overseeing the new agency. Hi, Minister. It's a pleasure to welcome you to our program. Thanks so much for making the time.
Thank you for having me, Vashi.
According to DND's own website, it takes on average for major defense projects, like the whole procurement cycle, somewhere on average between 10 and 15 years. How much faster will that be under this new agency?
Remarkably faster. That is completely unacceptable. It shouldn't take that long. It's exacerbated by the fact that the technology cycle is actually getting smaller and the defense procurement cycle is getting longer. So that even adds more stress to the situation, because the thing that you wanted on day one delivered 10 years into the future is virtually irrelevant. So we absolutely have to make it faster, and this single point of accountability with the resources and authorities that it now has is going to be capable of delivering much, much faster.
What is remarkably faster like? Can you quantify that? And I'm asking, not just to sort of come out of nowhere, but because we do have that average number, because there's been so many big projects that we focused on over the years that we know how long those take. Like, how do we hold your government accountable? What is remarkably faster?
Well, like you said, there's a long history of how fast it has been done. I mean, we can only control what we can control. We can control the process that we choose, and there's a number of procurement practices that we can choose. Some are faster than others. I need defense to deliver me requirements faster. They will move. I mean, and money doesn't seem to be the issue. The issue with the money is how we spend the money. That has been a barrier. People go through a project and then there's no funding and then it sits on a shelf for a long time. That doesn't seem to be the barrier moving forward. The challenge with the money bit is parlaying that spend into a way that benefits Canada the most effective way and delivers jobs for Canadians. But money will be there because that's a priority. So defense needs to deliver requirements faster. We will pick best in show or best in practice procurement processes that deliver faster, and this whole thing will go faster. I'll give you one example. Submarines. There was, I think, 24-ish responses to an RFI on submarines. We looked at them, evaluated them, and decided that there was 2 qualified suppliers. Now we're having 2 of them square off to see who's going to deliver, in this particular case, best benefit to Canada economically, because both submarines meet the Navy's high-level requirements. So we had said contract award in 2028. I'm hoping to do it next year. I'm
going to ask this one more time. What are the metrics that we're going to judge you by that, right? Like, I take your point on the example of submarines, but just put yourself in our shoes as Canadians. And you've been on the other end, too. You've listened so many times. Different governments say, hey, we've got the fix to this massive problem that we have. I understand the context is different right now, that the crisis we face vis-a-vis the United States is different, but like you're just saying, it's going to be faster. You can't tell me on average it'll be 5 years faster or 3 years faster or even what the target would be.
Yeah, and part of the reason is we don't control the whole process. Like, we control major aspects of it, but there's other things that I don't control. I mean, vendor returns, there's a whole bunch of things that I have no control over. So I can't give you a specific number because I don't have control over the entire process. I think that's the most logical answer I can give you. But if I go back to the process and the fact that the funds are available and will be protected in the budget, and that we have remarkably changed it in a way it had never been changed before. We have the resources we need, and there's absolutely no reason to think this won't go much, much faster.
I wanted to also ask about the impetus for doing this, as far as it was conveyed during the election, which is to move away from spending a lot of our defense procurement money in the United States. The Prime Minister had said it's 75 cents on every dollar, and that the goal would be to reduce that through this agency. I was reading some analysis last week, though, with the Hill Times, which indicated that in the first half of this year, so for half that period, your government has been in charge, and prior to that, the threat from Trump was also there. U.S.-based firms received more than $68.6 million in contracts awarded by DND, which is a 24% increase over the same period the previous year. Why should Canadians, Minister, believe this agency will be able to do what your government, even under the threat of Trump, has not yet been able to do?
Well, you bring up a good point. I mean, these are, to our earlier conversations, these things had been in the hopper for years, and this new reality that we live in vis-a-vis the United States is 10 months old. So it's like turning around an oil tanker. It just doesn't happen on a dime. So, I mean, I guess what we could have done is just canceled everything. And what would have that done to the timeline on delivering things to our military? It would have made a mess of it, right? So we are doing what we can moving forward. We have a couple different lenses to apply to our procurements. One is, can we do it in Canada? How can we maximize every dollar into our own supply chain, into our own great Canadian companies? How many jobs can we create? That's a new lens. And the other lens is, who are we going to partner with moving forward? Which like-minded nations do we want to have these long-term relationships with? And what else can we do with these nations? Can we parlay them into a bigger economic relationship? Because this defense spend is substantial, and there has to be other ways that we can capitalize on it. Spend it in Canada? Yep. And spend it with other countries that we want to work with and maybe build out other projects. There's tons of opportunity. But to your point, I mean, the way we did things the same way for decades, that does not change overnight.
And how will Canadians be able to judge the success or lack thereof on that? I heard a number of different exchanges, with journalists today in which you didn't want to put a target. What's the target? 50% from the U.S. less than 50%, different than that? Again, I understand it's a complex situation, but from the outside, if we're trying to say, like, have we actually achieved? Has your government actually achieve what you said you wanted to do? How will we be able to judge that? And are you kind of hoping that we won't by not putting a number on it?
No. I mean, in terms of it's a very difficult thing to put a number on, because it's really weapon system specific, or whatever it is, the good or service we're trying to procure, it's very specific. I mean, if the United States is the only place on planet Earth that we can get something that we absolutely need to do the job that we ask our Canadian Armed Forces to do, odds are we're going to buy it from the United States. We haven't ended the relationship with the United States. It is just going to look different. It makes no sense for Canada to be so reliant on one particular supplier for anything, whether it be the United States or anybody else.
I wanted to conclude by asking about the F-35s against exactly the backdrop that you just laid out. I heard you say at your press conference that you don't feel any pressure to make a decision about the F-35s, despite the initial deadline or timeline being provided by your government at the end of the summer. I was just wondering why you don't feel any pressure. The U.S. ambassador, for example, intimated to me in an interview in May that his country would be reconsidering NORAD if we drop the F-35s. That seems like a pressure-filled decision, no?
Well, I mean, I think I read something about that too. I mean, we're an equal partner with NORAD, and we're a sovereign country. So we will make our own decisions based on our own needs. I mean, it's that simple. I know the ambassador and other people have said things in the press to maybe indicate that they don't necessarily understand that, but Canada will stand on its own feet. We'll work with Americans where we can, and we'll stand on our own 2 feet where we have to. This is an important decision for us. Like I had mentioned earlier, if you saw it, we're under contract for 16 planes. The airplanes are in various stages of being manufactured at the supplier in the U.S. No decision's been made. It's a very complicated, file, and the Prime Minister will make a decision when he's ready. So this second sober look at what we're going to do moving forward isn't slowing anything down, and we'll take the time we need to get the decision right. That is the most important aspect of this decision.
But I mean, when it comes to the timeline, and you would know better than me given your experience in the military, but those CF-18s are, older than 30 years old. The Australian stopgaps are also very old. Operational readiness has dropped in some years. Less than 60% of our fleet, for example, is available. And once again, I think to the outside, that feels like there is pressure to make a decision. Combine that with what the U.S. is saying about NORAD, which, despite our relationship right now, is integral to the defense of this continent. Like, why are you guys not able to even meet a deadline that you set yourselves for the end of the summer?
Well, like I said, the more you look at it, the more that you consider it. We've done a lot of things in the 34 sitting days that has happened. Major Projects Office, Build Canada Homes, the DIA, all the legislative, C5 through the House of Commons. I mean, there's literally a whole host of things that are happening right now at great speed because of the moment that we face. So this is an important decision, but there's lots of them to make. And, like I said, we're on contract for 16 airplanes. So we have, airplanes going through the system, and when the Prime Minister has all the information that he needs, he'll make the decision.
All right, Minister, I'm going to leave it on that note. Appreciate your time very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me on the show.